Early on in George Washington's career as General and Commander-in-Chief, he successfully pushed the British troops out of Boston. Unfortunately, they turned tail and ran right into New York to rally their men together. High off the chase, the American Yankees were drawn into the city and then pinned against the East River. In the New York pursuit, Washington had 3 generals in his army that led sections of his men. 2 of those generals were captured in New York. George watched helplessly from across the East River as it happened and was quoted saying, "Good God, what brave fellows I must lose." The British made a critical mistake then. They figured the remaining Americans under Washington weren't going anywhere anytime soon, since their backs were pressed against the river. So they went to bed that night and planned on crushing them the next morning. What they didn't anticipate was just how crafty George could be in a pinch. By the skin of his teeth, he was able to smuggle his remaining men out Long Island in the night. A God-sent fog rolling in the early morning hours to protect their escape. George was said to be the very last man to leave Brooklyn. That defeat stayed with George through the rest of the Revolutionary War. He tortured himself over what he could have done differently, the men it had cost him, and how he could reclaim New York. Unfortunately, he would never get the chance to take the major city by storm, but in 1783 he did return. General George Washington's great re-entry into New York came after the British had finally evacuated the colonies and the war was won. George rode into the city with 800 men behind him. He was on his way to be relieved of his commission as General and Commander-in-Arms of the Continental Army, but reclaiming New York, even if only ceremonially, was imperative to Washington. Men, women, and children met George and his troops in the streets, cheering their return. It must have been the greatest feeling to George to know it was his victory that freed those people. George would travel to Annapolis then to return his commission to Congress. It wouldn't be longer than 5 years before he would be returning to New York in 1789 under a different title, First President of the United States of America. Introducing the 5th coin in the An American Life, Life of Washington, half-ounce silver coin series. George Washington's great entry. An American icon, an American hero, an American life. Only from 7K.